Okay, so we're back, and this is the second game of the match. So the first game of the match was incredibly interesting. Steinitz demonstrating actually really good positional and strategic sense and structural sense of the position. Chigorin demonstrating his dynamic feel for the position, except when he gave up his bishop. Yeah, that was the key mistake I think he made. Then he gave up the large degree of the potential of his attack and left himself with knights and bad bishop. Yeah. Still, the position was equal, so the game should have been logically ending in a draw, but probably due to time trouble, Steinitz blundered the whole piece. Alright, the second game, Steinitz is playing white, and he starts the game with a super modern Reti knight f3 first move. Yeah, this is kind of shocking to me because, you know, his match against Zukertort, he was pretty much e4, c4, d4, but here he starts the game with knight f3. So black plays d5, white plays d4, and the idea is to, you know, go back into the queen's gambits. And now black plays bishop g4. I have to note that there is a legendary opening called Chigorin's defense, which starts with knight c6, which he invented. Okay, is named after this guy. Chigorin's defense was famous and actually played a lot on different levels, including the very top levels by the legendary grandmasters like Alexander Morozevich. He was a huge fan of the opening and he played it like until he was actually elite player, and until white found like some forced line where he gets huge advantage. Okay, but before that he played it continuously. So knight c6, but in this game he played bishop g4. So I'm very curious when he invented knight c6. Was it before or after this match? That was something very interesting to note. Yeah, bishop g4. The idea is like just like in Reti opening, black provokes white into playing knight e5. But later, once the bishop moves, this knight can be used to play either f6, e5 or for the trades. Okay, so it looks like black gives white a tempo to play knight e5, but in reality, later he gains this tempo back by hitting the knight. Okay, so let's see, knight e5. And bishop h5 is incorrect. He had to play bishop f5, which is, you know, those people who are familiar with London Jibava systems and London, they know that the bishop belongs on the f file. Yeah, the bishop h5, the problem with this move is that there is this famous Slav motif, and of course, just before commentating game number 1, we went to the wiki where there was this interesting mention of Chigorin starting to develop the Slav defense. Okay, and one of the biggest problems in Slav defense for black is exactly this structure, where white has knight on e5 and pawns on g4, h4, threatening to capture this bishop, forcing black to play either f6, and then this is big problems for black. The light squares are weak. Sometimes black plays e6, not king f7. But if white has a way to open the center, that king will be extremely vulnerable. So pair of bishops is not good. Or you play h5 and at least to even a worst case scenario, now this pawn is extremely weak. Okay, so this would be a huge problem for black if Steinitz found it. More likely, I think he would play something like f6 maybe here and go into this line. But it's still like, you know, big problem for black because this pawn will be vulnerable. Pair of bishops again. Okay, but this plan was not known then because the Slav defense didn't exist even. Okay, so no fault. But Steinitz hit on the right idea. He played queen d3, and this is a very famous idea in such situations. The queen can go to h3, hit the bishop. So the idea is like, for example, black plays e6. White can play queen h3 and then g4, and after bishop g6 you cannot recapture because of the pin. Then you play g5 and you win the pawn. Okay, This is actually a pretty famous idea also for white. So black has to be very, very careful. So queen d3 is a very strong move by Steinitz actually. So Chigorin plays queen c8, finds a way to protect against the check, and queen h3 both. And white plays c4. All right, very interesting game so far. Very, very interesting. Yeah. So the queen on d3, like, you know, it kind of goes against the basic principles of chess. You're not supposed to develop your queen so early. But here it was very concrete idea of queen b5, queen h3. Yeah. Still, the engine suggests you should play queen b3 here, trying to use the momentum. And then if e6, then it closes the queen and you can go back to this idea. Right? And if you play c6, then white can play g4 anyway, because if black captures on here, then he loses this thing on b7. So queen b3 was extremely strong. The correct line is given as knight of 6, e4. Again, thanks to the spin. If black takes, then there's an incredibly strong move, bishop e2. Incredibly strong move. Again, the threat is getting to this pawn on f7. Bishop g6 runs into h4, h5, familiar motive. And if e6, you do the same thing. Okay, so this is very, very bad thing for black and Slav in general. And that's what you want to achieve with white, okay? So in the game, c4, black plays f6, third line, not bad. The first line is, of course, you take here and immediately try to get rid of this guy. And it will be very interesting if Steinitz would found the idea of leaving this knight here, because he was not a big fan of the double pawns. But in this particular situation, these double pawns are very strong because they take away a lot of squares and also close this bishop completely. Okay, like f3, and this bishop is closed by this pawn wall. Also, in the future, why the structure is so good for white, if black ever plays c6, or white can actually later force this pawn move, you get access to the square for your pieces and then recapture with the pawn. All right, so this pawn structure is like really good for white, but of course it's not. It's known later, much later, like centuries later. Yeah. So I'm very curious what would be Steinitz's reaction here. But Chigorin played this move, and yeah, and this was a little bit off. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if they were reversed colors, Chigorin will find g4 move, because g4 in that time was already played idea, and this really looks like Chigorin's way of playing chess. You know, pair of bishops, total mess in the center, but really weak light squares for black. So g4 was very, very strong, and after knight f3, now black actually has situation more or less under control, because the worst is behind. Yeah. e6, c6 is a little bit better, but okay, e6, and white plays this, logical. Bishop g6 is probably inaccurate, yeah. But I'm curious why white cannot play this move, which is standard. And the response is that, yeah, if black takes on e4, then obviously the gamble pays off. Yeah, this is weak pawn, and white is just better. Yeah, the problem is that black can play this move and keep this pawn alive. If he can keep this pawn alive and then knight e7, bishop g6, create pressure, then black is actually okay, yeah. So the way for white to play this position is to play in the modern Catalan style. First g3, bishop g2, prepare the castling, and then you prepare e4, yeah. So you kind of need to be patient here. So what happened? Chigorin played this, queen d1, c6, and e3. Yes, e3 And I think the ideas of G3 Catalan, they were not yet born that time. But of course, in modern player would recognize that this is superior Catalan, especially with the pawn on f6, yeah? And then again, you just go for this, and then knight d2 and e4 at some point. And then this weakness on e6 will be a huge problem for black. But Steinitz plays e3, and black has actually possibly a chance to go for the Dutch stone wall, okay? Which was also not that well known at that time. It was pioneered much later, like by Botvinnik, because before Botvinnik, the Dutch stone wall type of structure was considered to be really bad because of the obvious hole on e5, okay? So people stayed away from that structure. So let's see if Chigorin plays this, and he actually did. Okay, interesting. Bishop d6, bishop d2, okay. Knight e7, logical developing moves, I like. Bishop, okay, rook c1, very logical also. Potential pins here. The problem though for white, like he needs to develop his pieces, yeah. So knight d7 and knight h4. The idea of knight h4 is to threaten the exchange, but more if bishop moves, you can develop this knight to bishop to d3, okay. And black plays f5. Right. Okay. So we got a pretty much stonewall years, decades ahead of the Botvinnik. Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Didn't realize it. Okay. So Chigorin plays Dutch stonewall pretty much. Yeah. And okay, I have to show you this engine move, which is incredible. Yeah, knight b5. Yeah. The idea is that if bishop moves somewhere, you can take, and bishop b4. Okay, and then knight lands here, exchanging the bishop. And if you can do it, of course, like starting with this, but knight b5 immediately, like this piece sacrifice. Yeah, what is this? But bishop comes to b5. Yeah, surprisingly, the evaluation of this position is equal because knights are great blockaders and white doesn't have this way to push this pawn to e5. If he did, white would be winning, but he doesn't. So that's incredibly interesting. Instead, Steinitz plays g4. Very, very interesting move. So he wants to keep the pressure on the bishop and this pawn alive. Also, in Dutch defense, this g4 is well known as the very strong counter to black's pawn structure. Yeah. The idea is if you want to take on f5 and if black takes with this pawn, then the whole central structure for black collapses. So the only negative of this move is that he's kind of like underdeveloped. And what did he do? He played knight f6, very logical move, yeah. First line actually. And if white takes on f5 here, knight takes, and you gotta take the bishop. But knights are really well placed. This knight especially blocks this attack. And then g5, g4 is coming. Knights are stronger than the bishops in this position because the position is semi-closed. And this bishop is kind of not that good. So, knight f6, Steinitz plays h3, first line, waiting move. Again, keeps the tension on the board, doesn't let black off the hook so easily, and black plays knight e4. Yeah, the engine gives this move as inaccurate, but it's not that bad. The suggested move is knight f7, keeping this bishop alive. The threat g5 forces white to do something, like you take, and then this bishop is really well placed here. Okay, so no, you can't really actually take the pawn. Yeah, you should not open this bishop for sure. So bishop d3, and this will be critical position to understand like who is better here. And it's not very clear. Not very clear at all, because this is still no threat, but you know, you're keeping this bishop closed, yeah? Like g5, knight f3, h6. White is pretty much okay because of the counter threat. And then if you take, then take, and the pawn structure is pretty bad for black now, yeah? Okay, also tactics. Must play this. The reason you play this is to stop the castling for black. Yeah, and white is better because, you know, queen f3 is coming and a lot of weaknesses. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, very hard to play this position even in modern, for modern players, I'm pretty sure. But Chigorin plays knight e4. Chigorin plays knight e4. Okay, it actually makes a lot of sense. He offers the trade, and he also wants to take this bishop, yeah? So bishop d3, again maintaining the pressure on this diagonal. And black makes kind of a mistake here. So he could have just castled, and he needed to keep this pressure on board, I guess. And now bishop can take. Take. The reason black can play this is because he can play this. And this is the structure which is pretty normal for Chigorin's defense, okay? This is actually what Chigorin later in his, after he invents his opening, this is the standard structure for that opening for black. White has pair of bishops, black has mobile knights and potential ways to attack the center, and white king is like stuck in the center. Yeah. Hey, Mr. Quantenhurst. How are you? All right, so extremely interesting position. I'm not sure why he played this before castling, but this is kind of bad because now the entire outpost here falls apart immediately. And of course, white takes the central horse, and white gets the beautiful center, and black is stuck with weaknesses. Yeah, this was clear error on Chigorin's part. He went from a roughly equal position to pretty much strategically lost game. It's plus 2.5 now. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And HE4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not only black lost the pawn, but his position is now so horrible. Beautiful knight, extra pawn, a lot of weaknesses, and black is strategically lost. So E5 hastens the end, but you know, I'm pretty sure Chigorin didn't want to play this position where white has, you know, all the attack in the world, g5, queen h5. So he just, at this point, I'm pretty much, he realized he just blundered, and he decided to, you know, finish the game as soon as possible. Of course, white plays d5, blockading knights, another weakness done, and bishop c3. Very human move. Yeah, the ancient suggests bishop a5 to prevent rook d8, but I think bishop c3 is fine. So rook d8, yes, and rook h5, another human move, hitting this pawn. Yeah, the only thing I'm surprised is that, yeah, I think Chigorin was pretty much respecting Steinitz structure and endgame skills, that he didn't even consider playing this. Even though this is still kind of give him a chance, because yes, white can play f4 using the spin. There's a threat of f5, but the game is still like not finished yet. If you play f5, kind of black is holding by his teeth here. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad, but some chances. Yeah. Instead, he just castled and d6. Yeah. 26. If you take on d6, there are many ways to play this. I think check on rook d1 is also playable, but apparently you can take this also and play this. Yeah, that's obviously a big problem. So d6, queen e6, and queen b3, and same idea. Yeah, white is doing what I told you guys always to do. If you have material advantage, trade pieces down into the winning endgame. All right, the easiest way to win your game. You minimize the risk, you minimize your chances of blundering stuff. Black takes on d6, and this is equivalent to losing. But okay, it was completely lost anyway. And bishop b4, yeah. So if in the previous game it was Steinitz who blundered, in this game he plays absolutely beautifully with white and demonstrates he's pretty much playing top line moves, top engine moves, man, in this endgame. Absolutely incredible show. f3, okay, rook a6, first line, and now because of this e4 check, black is forced to trade the rooks, and so he can resign. Yes, the most interesting moment in this game for me is that black played f5 and he demonstrates his aggressive intentions. He's like knight f6, bishop here, potentially g5, knight e4, attack, yeah? But Steinitz plays g4 and says, you think you're better on this flank? No, I'm gonna fight you for this flank, okay? I'm not gonna give you a chance to create this attack, okay? So maintaining the tension, the pawn on g4, and again, maintaining the tension, okay? He's fighting black where black is stronger, in a way. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, yeah? So very, very brave play by Steinitz here. Deep understanding both of the positional demands of this game for white, but also, you know, he understood the psychology of his opponent, yeah? Yeah. That black wants to attack, but there is no way for black to attack without, you know, creating problems for his structure, okay? And Chigorin was never the one who plays passive positions well. So he needed to clarify. He wanted to clarify to open the position, but opening of this position in this moment caused him the loss of the game. Okay, so that was the single blunder, but it was absolutely critical. All right, that was the second game of the match, and that's it for today. Okay, I'm gonna cover like only 2 games per day because you know, I kind of would like to keep that impression on the game so it stays longer with me, and try to go a little bit more in depth, and knowing what I know about the players, trying to give you again some insight into psychological decision making. All right, so absolutely brilliantly played. You know, these guys, like, again, I would like to tell you is that they were way ahead of the time. Yeah, I thought the Dutch defense at the World Chess Championship match level was played like by Botvinnik only, but again, I was wrong. Same idea I was wrong about Steinitz and Zukertor. They playing Berlin defense and at a pretty good level too. Yeah. So these gentlemen were way ahead of their time, demonstrating some ideas. Yes, he didn't know about this 95 g4 h4 idea, but you know, the rest of the game he demonstrated very good understanding. All right, gentlemen, hope you enjoyed this analysis, and tomorrow is what, Tuesday? I'm probably gonna do this World Championship matches once every 2 days or every 3 days, okay? So tomorrow is Tuesday, I'll get a break After tomorrow on Wednesday, we have the classical chess simul, I guess, or the tournaments. I don't remember what we had last time. And then on Thursday, I'll probably, or Friday, I'll do this third and fourth game of the match. Okay. I'll also put these videos on my Twitch. If you're a subscriber, you can watch them. And I'll also put them on YouTube, but a little bit later. All right. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for coming. Leave comments on my YouTube. All right. If you have some questions or some comments, I'm reading all your comments. Yes. I don't reply, but I might start replying. Okay. I might. I just not a big social network person. I like to read stuff, watch stuff, but write something unless it is something that is very dear to me, like it's something related to cheating, then I don't control myself. I apologize for that. I get very angry, then I can post some stuff. But apart from that, I normally don't post a lot of things. All right, see you guys on Wednesday and have a good time.